everybody. Welcome to Neuroscience for Numpties. I am Joe, your host. I hope you are all having a wonderful day, and welcome to this little corner of the internet. So this episode today, I'm going to be talking about what is Neuroscience for Numpties, and is it right for you? What does it have to offer you? Well, first of all, I have a little bit of explaining to do. What is a vlogcast? So the vlogcast, it's a description I've been using kind of as a joke to talk about this show, but it's actually kind of accurate, so that's why I'm using it. The show is a vlog in as much as probably 80% of it is going to be me talking into a camera. But the heart of the show was always intended to be a podcast. And so, but this is kind of what I can do with the technology that I have at the moment. And so, and I figured, actually it would be better to have some visuals every once in a while, because I can, hopefully during the course of the show share some visuals with you, and that would be nice, and then you're not just looking at me. So first of all, I want to talk about three things in this episode. For why is the show necessary? Who am I and why am I qualified to start a show like this? And then what does the show actually offer? So first and foremost, the Neuroscience for Numpties, the title, is a play on kind of the Dummies series. So like, let's say Accounting for Dummies. So Neuroscience for Numpties is for the people who are interested in neuroscience, but maybe were always intimidated by it. I mean, to be fair, when I think of neuroscience, especially when I was younger, I used to think of neuroscience like it was rocket science or something like that. I just never thought that I would ever be a neuroscientist, and then yet here I am. So Neuroscience for Numpties is for those individuals who, don't have any formal training in neuroscience, nor are they probably ever going to get formal training in neuroscience. And they just, maybe you always thought it was beyond your reach, and so this show is supposed to be a very casual and relaxed conversation about neuroscience, talking about it in a way that's easily accessible to anyone. So that means the show is going to be very chill, very relaxed, and I'm going to avoid the jargon. I'm going to do my best. I understand it's science, and it's there are going to be technical terms here and there, but I'm going to do my best to avoid using jargon, and whenever I use the jargon, to very simply define it, and maybe even substitute some of the words for something that's a little more intuitive. So moving to the second point, why is the show necessary? Well, first of all, there's a really, actually alarmingly large gap between what scientists understand and what they're doing in modern research, and then what the general public understands. And typically this gap is kind of bridged by science journalists. These are typically not actual scientists, but they have some training in science, and then they go and they talk to the scientists and talk about their research, and maybe a 30-minute interview, and then they write an article about it. And well, there's a couple issues with that system. First and foremost, there's issues with the scientists. They might be brilliant mathematicians, they might be brilliant at research methods and data analytics and things like that, but not all scientists are very good communicators. And so they struggle to communicate their ideas, their research, to bottom line things. And that makes it difficult not only for them to talk to the journalists, but also to talk to, the general public. And so now the journalists, their job, they're really good communicators. And so their job is to break down what the scientist is doing. But then you have sort of sometimes a lack of understanding, because the journalist might be an excellent communicator, but they're not necessarily a scientist. They might have a minor in neuroscience, for example, or a bachelor's degree in neuroscience, but those aren't research degrees. And so they might not have that much experience with research. And then the quality of the article can suffer. And not to mention that the journalist, it's their day job. The journalist, they're trying to get headlines, they're trying to get clicks and generate profit, things like that. And so unfortunately, some of them are very relaxed with their interpretation of the science. You're not necessarily getting the most accurate science, or they go into the interview with the scientist with an agenda. And it's just, the priorities can be a little bit backwards. That's my point. And so what I'm trying to do is cut out the middleman. And basically, as a neuroscientist, I'm going to talk about my day job and break it down in a way that, I'm betting on the fact that my communication skills are going to be good enough to communicate the science in an interesting way, broadly appealing and simple. But that is also, part of what I get paid for is mentorship. I tutor undergraduates and college students in neuroscience and statistics and things like that. And so it made sense to me that, I have a lot of experience doing this stuff, and so why not start a show about it? And that kind of neatly transitions into who am I? So I am a doctoral student. I'm in kind of the latter end of my doctoral degree, which means that by the end of the degree, I will be a doctor. I currently am a student at Northwestern University, and I, as you might guess, studying neuroscience. More specifically, I study a subsection of neuroscience that has to do with the way that people think and behave. So I care about the brain and what goes on in the brain, and the nervous system in general, for that matter, in as much as it helps me understand how people think and behave. That's sort of the gist of what I study. I do work in a specific lab, and I'm happy to talk about the type of research that I do. I'm probably going to save that for another episode. In fact, I might even make this entire first season about, what I'm most familiar with, which would be my research. I think there's wisdom in playing to your strengths, especially when you're doing something new. And so I'm a little bit debating what the first season will be about, but I'm also getting a little bit ahead of myself. We'll talk about exactly what the show has to offer in this first season last. I am a doctoral student, and I do have a degree. I have a master's degree. So I am a working professional. I'm doing research full-time. I do neuroscience research full-time. I've read literally hundreds of papers. That is not an exaggeration. I've read hundreds of these neuroscience articles, and I've contributed a few of myself. I'm an active member of the neuroscience community, so you can be comfortable in the fact that this is my day job. This is what I do. I'm not necessarily the foremost expert in the world on neuroscience, but this is my day job. I do it every day. I publish in this field. I communicate with neuroscientists. And so, that is what makes me qualified to talk about these concepts, because I have been studying them for a number of years and actively contributing to that research. So now let's talk about what the show has to offer. So basically, I'm looking at the bread and butter of this show as breaking down the bleeding edge of neuroscience. So what that means is that I could basically go look at the neuroscience articles that have been published this year, or maybe even this month, and use my research skills to break down those articles and translate them into a sense that is easily understandable for anyone, people who don't have that neuroscience background. Because it really is a skill. It's a skill. Reading these articles is a skill. And if you don't have that skill, and never mind all the jargon and everything else that's used in these articles, you're going to have a really tough time of it if you don't have that education. And so what I'm looking to provide as the dominant service of this show is to take these articles and then break them down for the average person. So that is probably the priority number one, breaking down this very new and interesting science. And in some cases, it's not going to be brand new, because you'll actually be surprised by how much science has been able to do for a surprising number of years. For example, one question that I want to answer on the show would be like, is it possible to communicate with your brain, just using your brain, like telepathically communicate with technology? And this is something that science has been able to do, to my knowledge, since the 60s. And that's really fascinating, so I'd really love to talk about some of that stuff. Talk about, what's possible, and people might not think that, what they think of as science fiction has actually might have been able, we've been able to do it since the 60s. So that's really, really cool. I want to talk about what is possible and why, a little bit about how does it work. And then we could talk even about the sort of moral implications of that situation. Do we actually want to be able to communicate with technology? Because then, well, if the technology has direct access to what we think in our brains, then that could have some ethical implications. So those are an example. That's an example of the type of question that I might want to talk about on the show, and then I would be covering the articles in as much as they relate to that topic. Also, my research, like I mentioned earlier, my research might be a dominant theme in the show because, of course, that's what I'm most familiar with. And so, at least for this first season, I certainly want the show to broaden and cover a whole lot of different subsections of neuroscience. But my research is actually really interesting, and I know I'm biased because it's my research. Or rather, it's the research that I participate in. It's the lab that I work in. It's not my lab. But the research that I do on a daily basis is actually all about neuroscience-based lie detection, which is a very cool concept. But it kind of gets at that same question that I was just referencing of the ethics of looking at someone's brain and determining what they're thinking. Because that's kind of the heart of neuroscience-based lie detection, that you're looking into someone's head, looking at their brain physiology, and you're trying to understand what they're thinking about and whether or not they're telling the truth. And so that is there are some ethical considerations there, because people would kind of accuse us as scientists of reading people's minds, and that's certainly not what we're doing. But it's important, I think, to talk about that, and interesting to talk about that, and exactly what makes it what it is. Is it mind reading? Is it not mind reading? And why? So I look at those as a lot of very interesting conversations to have, and that will probably be the dominant theme of the show. You can also bet on a variety of topics. Each season is going to cover, like I said, a different subsection of neuroscience. So you can expect a lot of variety across the different episodes and across the different seasons. Another thing that I could talk about, I actually really like statistics. And so, but I've been debating whether or not I want, how much of a role I want statistics to play in Neuroscience for Numpties, because it's math and it's difficult and it's hard to talk about that on sort of an abstract or high level. However, I think just like neuroscience, it's nothing to be intimidated of. And I think that if I could talk about some of the basics, just very, very basic introductory elements of statistics, like p-values, for example, then we're going to be encountering a lot of those, a lot of statistics when I'm breaking down these articles and publications. And so it would be good, if you don't have this experience already, it would be good for me to break down what do these p-values mean, or what do these statistics mean in the article, so then you can have a more thorough understanding. But of course, keeping it broadly applicable, so most anyone can understand the content. So yeah, that is the basic core of the show, and I hope that it will be something that is very appealing to a variety of people. I know the show is it's going to start off very small, and it's going to take a long time to get things going. But for anyone who's interested and maybe wants to put this on in the background as they go throughout their day, you may learn something interesting. I think that a lot of these topics are inherently interesting, and I do want to emphasize that a big part of the show, or that I want going down the line as I gain viewership and whatnot, will be interacting with you guys. That is very much what I enjoy. I guess I didn't talk about my day job very much, but I do earn a salary for conducting this research. But another thing I earn my salary for is this mentorship of undergraduate students. And so my favorite part of tutoring undergraduates is talking to them. I really, really like it when they ask me interesting questions, and especially when the questions I don't necessarily know the answer to. And that's the whole reason I became a scientist. I didn't become a scientist because I already had all the answers. I became a scientist because I'm a problem solver and I like to solve difficult questions. So I really, really want that to be a core part of the show. I want to get you guys' feedback and what you guys are interested in, so then I can cover those topics. But of course, that's going to be very difficult to do if nobody's watching the show. So I figured I'd just kind of start off and get the ball rolling with the research that I'm familiar with, and hopefully that can, draw in the people who are interested and give them sort of a flavor for the show. And then as the viewership grows, then I can start to take in other people's ideas and implement and optimize the show and really make it something that, a show that has something to offer for everyone. So that'll be it for this episode. By the way, the episodes will be short. They're going to be like 15 to 20 minutes each, and we're at the 15-minute mark, so I think that is about the place where I'll cut it. I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.